culture historically was, well, they're not going to give an invitation. My lost friend's just going to come
This
and
is
have
good.
fun, but then they're going to go home and they're going to leave, and there's not a lot of point, right? Or there's a fear they're going to see me in my church element. Their life's not going to be changed. They're just going to go back to school and make fun of me, right? But then, like,
Yeah.
after we did it consistently over time, they started inviting. They started bringing it because they knew
Yes.
that we were serious about seeing. We don't just talk about it. We were serious about seeing their lost friends come to Christ. So then they got serious about inviting.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Simply Strategic Ministry podcast, where we help church leaders grow their ministries through simple strategies and scalable systems. My name's Landon. I'll be your host today, and I'm really excited to jump into today's conversation with my friend Brian Preston. He is the NextGen pastor at the church at Battle Creek, a ministry that you may not know of, but you should, because they are reaching so many students across multiple campuses and even in multiple states. And he's the NextGen pastor, so he oversees kids ministry and student ministries and all the different student ministries. And I believe he's going to bring to you today a really good take on student ministry and how to operate a NextGen ministry in a really healthy way that reaches students. And one of the things I love about Brian is that Brian, of course, is a fantastic leader, but he isn't the typical youth pastor mentality or mode or whatever archetype you have. He's not this big, giant personality that just takes over the room, but he is a really strategic leader who's trying to do things through systems and trying to do things in a really healthy way. And I think you're going to really benefit from today's conversation with Brian. As always, we'd love it if you would like, review, drop a rating on the podcast, help us get the word out on Spotify or on YouTube or wherever you're consuming the podcast. And don't forget, if you subscribe, we'll be sending you those about once or twice every month. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter. We'll be sending this out with a strategic plan of action to help you think and take this podcast to a really practical level within your ministry. So I'm excited about today's conversation. So let's jump into today's conversation with my friend, Brian Preston. All right, so I'm here with my friend, Brian. How are you today, man?
I am doing great. It's good to
Dude,
be here with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for hopping on this call with me and
Yeah.
and getting to invest in our community. I really appreciate it. So tell everybody where you're leading and tell us a little about you. What's your position? Where are you leading at?
Yeah. Well, let me just say one, I love what God's doing through you. So thank you for even just asking me and reaching out. So
Oh, thanks, man.
I am currently serving as the NextGen pastor at NextGen director, whatever you want to call it, at Battle Creek Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and serving here. I've been here now 6 years. It was literally 6 years a few days ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
moved from East Tennessee, came here, knew nothing about Midwest life, but here we are. And
Is it
serving as the
different?
Next-Gen.
Is Midwest
It
life
is.
different?
It is. It is. It is. I would say, a lot of things that you face in the Southeast are so good, so rich, but man, it just feels like there's a next level of zero pretense when you get here.
Okay.
People very much just come as you are, not expecting a lot of fluff. They want to get to know you. It's very
Yeah.
relational for sure. I had a
But there's
guy one time
tornadoes.
tell me
But you got
there are
tornadoes, right?
tornadoes.
Yeah.
There are tornadoes, but it's so flat that literally, in Tennessee, you get stuck in a bowl, you're not going anywhere, destruction happens.
Sure.
It's so flat they can tell exactly where it's going. So no worries there.
I
I
cut
had,
you
I
off.
had
You
a
were saying
mentor.
you had a guy.
Yeah, I had a mentor in Tennessee told me he was a youth pastor in Oklahoma a long time ago, and he said, what it lacks in landscape, it makes up for in people, and that has been the truest statement. So
That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah, man.
So tell us, so you've been there 6 years and you're now NextGen. Did you start as NextGen?
hmm No, I
Okay.
came in as the student director, and
Okay.
we have five campuses here in Tulsa, and came in to step into leading the student ministry as a whole. Prior, there really wasn't somebody who was like centrally driven as the student director. It was
Mhm.
always kind of like the broadcast campus had a guy that kind of led the team. And it was the first time they've really kind of taken a step and said, hey, we want to build a central ministry team. And so I stepped in as a student director, and my job from the get-go here has been on the central side of leading all of our campuses, specifically in student ministry, and now NextGen as a whole. So
Yeah. Yeah. So when you got there, there wasn't really a central structure. You kind of started
Well,
had to
there was a central
engineer that?
structure. There just wasn't a lot of central ministry leads,
Okay.
specifically, and so yeah, that when it came to like the ministry side of like kids, students, groups, like all of that, we kind of built a central structure within that.
So when you got there, you probably had to bring alignment to a lot of different things, I would imagine, just because. So what was that like? Was that an easy process? Was that a little more interesting?
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting. I will say I did not do well coming in.
Okay.
Not maybe externally, probably people
Yeah.
thought it was great, but internally, I came in trying to white knuckle everything. Okay, I'm coming
Okay.
from a single site, church to a multi-site environment. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving pieces, and it makes sense in my heart. I'm a big vision guy of like, hey, we're
Yeah.
going to rally around the vision. We're going to bring alignment to everything, but without a lot of relational equity. And so you're coming in trying to figure out how can we bring alignment to everything, but it really felt like I was trying to control everything. And
Yeah.
so I've learned a lot in those early years of like, how can I not come across as if I'm trying to predetermine everything, but how can I really come alongside of our campuses and really rally them, through relationship to the goal of where we're trying to lead to. So,
Yeah. So I talked to a lot of student pastors, and to who are specifically are trying to figure out how to make this move from single site to multi
mhm.
site. And I know there's all kinds of great. We've had Sweb on the podcast before talking about the multi site tensions, and he's the
Yeah,
guru on that. But a
he's
lot
the
of people don't
guru.
talk. A lot of people don't talk specifically student ministry, and student ministry. And I know each ministry has its own nuances, but student ministry, a lot of times you're hiring a high personality driven guy just because that's kind of the water that everybody swims in Gen Z world.
Right, right.
And you're often bringing in a high personality guy, and then well, if you got two of those guys and one who's probably not that much older than the next one, it's normally the youth pastor spread is not more than 5 years
Right.
in most churches. Then it becomes really tricky because one guy gets promoted to central, and then
Hmm.
a lot of times the other guys don't. And so I feel like, and I've also heard from multi-site guys that say like moving from 1 to 2, there's a lot of tensions, but moving to 1 to 3 is a paradigm shift, like for all the
Hmm.
ministries. So I think a lot of guys are navigating this because as multi-site just gets bigger and bigger. So what would you say
Yeah.
are some of the big lessons that you learned in that?
Well, the first thing I would tell you, going back to like an old quote that probably many have heard, but there's tensions to be managed and there's problems to be solved. And
Yeah.
multi-site itself, I believe, is a tension to be managed. It is not a problem to be solved. And if you're trying to solve the problem of multi-site, man, you probably won't be in multi-site very long because there's just always going to be frustrations that bubble up over time.
Yeah.
And communication has to be at a premium. And when it's not, you feel it. And so
Mhm.
just even coming in, it was a big learning curve for me of going, how can I support and come alongside
Yeah.
of each of our student pastors, but really still, hey, we got a goal we're striving for, y'all.
Mhm.
Was not necessarily easy, and I would say like even going from like I came in to multiple campuses, but even just coming from a single site to a multi-site world, it was learning the premiums on communication. It was learning that at the end of the day there are going to be frustrations that happen, but how do you step into them, how you lean into them quickly,
Mhm.
not allowing things to kind of go unresolved. And then the biggest thing, like we've already kind of looked at, is like how do we keep the vision out in front of people,
Yeah.
because it's going to be real easy, specifically, we kind of structure ours with like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is like it's a centrally driven, just we'll take events for instance, like it's a centrally
Yeah.
driven play that we do, like student camp, where all of our campuses come together in one location and one thing. Then tier 2 would be like a centrally driven play, but it's played out on each different campus. And tier
Okay.
3 is, hey, on their campus, they kind of, if the girls' night wants to run at Midtown campus, then they can run it, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I say all that to say, like, even within that, it's going, there could be a lot of offshoots and nuances that start to pop up because, hey, campuses think, hey, I'm going to do this and this could be super effective for me. But again, reminding, hey, what is the vision that we're trying to walk towards, head towards, and does that fit in with what we're trying to accomplish? And even centrally, what are the things that we're doing, and are we doing anything that doesn't support the mission? Well, if we are, then we need to prune back. So,
Yeah. What did you feel like was some of the hardest areas to bring alignment with?
hmm. That's a great question. I think with like early on, it was like the week to week of just bringing alignment to like our service and like our programming within student ministry.
Yeah.
So, for me, I call it gospel centered ministry, but it's just a term that I've gone on to talk about, like how can we keep one Jesus at the center, and then around Jesus you've got a Sunday and a Wednesday play. And so for us, Wednesday night is kind of the front door of our student ministry. Come in, easy invite, that kind of thing, highly relational. Sunday, we're connecting to a group, we're connecting to a community, and Wednesday has to feed Sunday, Sunday has to feed Wednesday, and all the while we're predicated and built on the gospel. But I'd say all that to say this is that early on, it was like, how do we bring alignment to even what we do week to week? So when I first came in, it was like, hey, Sunday and Wednesday kind of look eerily similar. They were almost carbon copies of each other. And so you had Sunday that was running, X number of people, but then on Wednesday there was a huge drop off because it was the same thing and kids didn't necessarily feel the need to want to come. So it was like, hey, how do we bring alignment to, hey, really, what's the purpose in these things? But then even with like service structure flows where like, maybe on Sunday you've got this campus running worship, but this campus is not. Wednesday, this campus is taking X number of time for games and things like that. And this campus is going way too long on their worship set. Like it was kind of bringing some alignment and structure and going, hey, really what we want Battle Creek student experience to be, at one campus, they should be able to go to another campus the next week, even though it's a different size, even the culture might be slightly different. They're still going to get a similar experience, and they're still going to be a part of, feeling like it's a Battle Creek student culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good to point out that what you guys are doing is working too. It's good to have strategy and ideas, but like you guys are reaching a lot of students. Like out of all the student ministries I know, I look to Battle Creek, and I don't feel like Battle Creek is like the one that everybody in the youth ministry world is like pointing out as like the model, but I'm like, that should be the model. Like I watch you guys reach a ton of students, and
It's a lot of fun.
you just kind of quietly fly under the radar, So like how many students you guys usually reaching on in a given week across all your campuses?
On a week-to-week basis, we're averaging right around 750 students.
Wow.
And then, nuance with events and different things, our reach is a little further, but on the average, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys are reaching a ton of students. And that's, in today's world, gosh, students come to church once every month. I mean, you could probably put a 3.5 times multiplier on that of how many students are actually engaging in your ministry. And so, I mean, I think one of the reasons I want to bring you on is because you guys are doing it in a way that is not necessarily flashy, but is like, it's kind of tried and true. And we were talking about this before we hit record is, like last night you guys had, at the time of recording this at least, you guys just hosted a dodgeball tournament that was like the standard invest and invite play. Okay. Yep. It's not some like, it's not like some online ministry platform or, it's
unapologetically evangelistic in person.
Exactly. Like it is the tried and true, student ministry thing. And I talk to guys all the time. We're like, we don't want to be the church that, just has pizza and games and we want, and I get that. I get that there was I was talking to one of our mutual friends that you and I both know, and he had taken over student ministry who the student ministry was in decline, and he became the NextGen pastor. And it was like they took away the Wednesday night food that they did a meal every single week, and like the student ministry died. And so we've all seen that. We've all seen the ministries that like just throw out money because they got money, basically.
Right. Sure.
But But you guys are doing something that's very conventional and it's working. Why have
Hmm.
you not gone away from that like so many people are going away from right now?
I think at the end of the day, you look back on some of the principles and things that like churches were thriving in, decades ago. And, we move away from some of those things just based on culture and technology and advancement and all that. And rightfully so in some ways. But I think we also have to remember that like even the things that were working decades ago were also working 2000 years ago, and so
Yeah.
understanding like the goal still remains the same. Just like Jesus was reaching people and equipping people, the goal remains the same. How can we reach students and
Yeah.
equip students, and I want to equip them then to reach other people. And so for us, we're still evolving in terms of how we can continue to grow. We're not perfect by any means, but one of the things that I think has been super successful has been not forgetting who we are.
Hmm.
And Battle Creek itself is a little bit, you talked about not flashy or flair. I want to be a church that can be a support and a help to a lot of churches around the world. But you talked about not being flat. I mean, it's a little bit symbolic of kind of who our lead pastor is. And,
Hmm.
Pastor Alex is almost like he's not cool for being he's cool for not being cool. Like he's just going to
Yeah.
be unapologetically himself everywhere
Yeah.
he's at, no
That's
matter where
that's
he's
the
on
coolest
stage or
side.
off stage. Yeah, all of it. And so for us, it's a little bit symbolic of kind of how we operate. We're not trying to bait and switch. We're not trying to flash and flare. We're going to be unapologetic in kind of who we are. So even like with dodgeball, from the get go, we say, "Hey, we're going to run this event, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be outrageous. It's going to be it's going to be live, and the energy is going to be electric. However, you need to know up front that the goal with this event is that we want to reach your friends for the gospel, and we want to give you a platform to then go and reach your friends. And we're going to make it as easy as we possibly can for you to invite them to hear about Jesus. But truthfully, in the process, if you want to share Jesus, that's the goal. Like we want to get them in and around the gospel. And so we make that clear up front. We put it on all of our promo. You're going to hear a gospel message. Like it's going to be the thing that we're about. And so even as they came in last night, it's like we're going to get to the tournament and we get to it quick because that's why they're there. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we want to be unapologetic. And so the premise of even our calendar, like it's not that we're solely evangelistic. We're going to equip students too, but we're also not going to be afraid to earmark at least a couple
Mhm.
times a year to go, man, let's go get people for the gospel.
Yeah. The invest and invite strategy still works.
Still
Like,
works, man.
and
Still works. And it's not just that we say it from a church standpoint, it's that we actually want to train our students to know what that means and them
yeah,
do it. So like
yeah,
even with dodgeball this year, I knew to a degree we may not reach as many people this year because we changed our strategy a little bit.
okay,
We went from, a lot of times our student pastors getting on school campuses, blitzing school campuses with invite cards and all that kind of stuff.
yep,
We changed our strategy because last year we reached a lot of people, just like we did this year. But at the same time, it was one of those earmarker moments of going, hey, we're kind of at the ceiling of what our people can handle. We need to change our strategy and how we reach people. So this year it was let's train our students to sign up to go into their schools and we trained them, we taught them how to do it, and then we set them
ah,
loose with the invite cards so that they would be the ones going and reaching their friends. And we saw a little bit of that numerical hit, but it's kind of like if you were going from a full contracted band to a full student led band, like you're going to take a hit in quality, right?
yeah.
But over time, your hope is to build students up to be able to lead. And so that was the goal was, man, like, how can we equip our students to know how to invest and invite? And we're going to give them the tools on how to do it. We're not just going to say we're about it. We're going to teach them and train them how to do it.
So you actually train students before the event for the event, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So tell us a little about what you did there, because I think it's a brilliant strategy.
Yeah. I mean, it was as, mm, how do I say this? Like if you, like I'll just take Broken Arrow for instance. Like last year, it was a lot of the staff with a few students that would go with them into the schools, handing out cards, doing all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it's good earmarker. Like we'll pass out like 10,000 cards in hopes to
Yeah,
hit 1,000 students, like a
yeah,
10% rule.
10% rule.
But even with that, it's this year it was, hey, let's identify all of, like Broken Arrow is a big campus, so identifying all the different schools that they reach, and then getting those students to sign up to go reach their school on a specific day, specific time, and then we met when a Sunday prior, trained them on a Sunday night prior of what the expectations were, why we were doing it, all that kind of stuff, and then gave them the cool tools on how to be
Yeah,
successful
I
in it.
love
And
that.
then set a time for it to get in the schools and go do it, and they did, man. So I don't think the reach may have not have been as wide yet, but we're giving them the tools so that we're thinking long term, not just now.
Yeah, and I mean, you equip them too. Like that's where I
Yep.
think a lot of times people will take events and be like, "Oh, you're an event-driven ministry," but like you can strategically do events in a way that not only boosts attendance in your stat sheet, if you will, but also
Hmm.
produces salvation and baptisms. But
Yep.
also you can use camp as a way to partner with parents.
Hmm.
You can use this event like you did right here to train people to be missional. It's
It's
not
changing
just
your
like,
mind.
yeah.
It's
Go
changing
ahead.
your
Go ahead. Go
mindset
ahead.
to go. It's changing your mindset to go. Everything's discipleship. Everything.
Mm,
So it's just because we're doing a huge evangelistic event doesn't mean that discipleship's not happening. We've got to change our mindset to go. Everything's discipleship. We're training and teaching people how to do it.
yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a reductionistic view that, there's discipleship, there's evangelism, there's mission, there's formation. And,
Right.
in so many ways, um, in so many ways we've reduced those things down to binary categories as opposed to
Right.
this being this really holistic strategy. Two things that we did when during my time in student ministry, and one was, I wouldn't even say we did it, but somebody else did it. Um, is one is like we said, all right, how do we do camp every single year? How do we partner? Like one of our values was partner with parents. And
Hmm.
we basically did not partner with parents outside of just doing a parent meeting before like everybody else does. But
Right.
just
Right.
like trying to think, is there 3 weeks before we can encourage a family devotional to prep for camp? Is there a prayer guide we can give out? Like just taking the things
Mm,
that you already do to try to
it's good.
embody all of your values at once, like you just did. Another
Yeah.
thing that we did, that I loved, and this was Greg Gibson, our mutual friend. It was
Hmm.
his idea. Is he had this idea once I thought was awesome. He was like, let's give out a T-shirt to every student, but they have to commit that they will wear that T-shirt the 5 days leading up to dodgeball every day
Yep.
going to school as a
Yep.
conversational piece. And
Yep.
we were a small student ministry at the time, and we went 5 times our attendance that week just because
Yep.
students were empowered as opposed to let's do campus ministry, the old strategy where we're just burning out youth pastors being on campus every week and every
Right.
night of the week. So I think that's so
Yep.
good. There's also too. We were talking before this. I love, and I'm in the culture that I'm in right now has a little more of the Dallas Willard, Richard Foster spiritual
Yeah.
formation influences in it, which I think we've kind of resurrected that around like John Mark Comer and some of those figureheads in that movement, and I think that's so
Yeah.
good. It's been so valuable,
For sure.
but there has been a little bit of a pushback, and I think this is natural in more post-Christian environments, like the Seattle and like the Portlands. But there's been a pushback to like the evangelism strategy of invest and invite them, and then give an invitation, okay, and
Hmm.
call people to faith in Jesus. And I get it.
Yeah.
We've all been to youth events that has been done manipulative, and that is just bad. Okay,
Yep.
but there's still a reason why American Christianity has taken off, and it's because people like Billy Graham and Finney and George Whitfield said, "Hey, today's the day of salvation." You guys are still giving invitations. You guys are still calling people to respond, and you just saw a ton of people in this year of your ministry give their life to Jesus. So talk to
Yep.
me about how you guys are doing invitations and why you think that's still a valuable piece of ministry.
Yeah, I'll start with this. Like, I think at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to set the tone by empowering students to know how to invite their peers to church. But then when they come, inviting them to respond to Jesus in a service, yes to salvation, but honestly, just inviting them to move in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Every time the word of God is preached, there's a response that happens. And to not respond is a response, right? And so
Yep.
in your heart, as you're hearing and receiving God's word, like God is working in you to initiate a response in you. And for us, what we've seen, at least in students, is typically it's inviting them to even respond physically in some way, because if they
Yeah.
can put a physical marker at that moment, then it will do so much for helping them put into action what God is trying to do in their life in that moment. And I would
Yeah.
much rather, I say this to our student team all the time, and I've wrestled this to the ground. So if anybody gets upset, you can come talk to me because I understand your point of view, but I wrestled it out myself.
All right. Good.
Is I would much rather a kid respond out of immaturity than to not respond at all. I would much rather them respond knowing that God is moving them in that moment. Last night is a great example. Preached at our Milltown campus, saw a ton of students respond to the gospel. I brought them forward to the stage, and when I brought them up, man, you can just discern in those moments, that there's some students that are very serious by the way that, man, the emotion is all over their face. And there's some students that you're going, maybe quiet hasn't set in with you yet, but I looked them all in the face and I said, hey, listen, I know some of you may have responded out of immaturity, or may have responded because your friend got up and you felt like it was the right thing to do in this moment. I just want to tell you, I believe God in heaven sees you, and he allowed you to stand up in this moment because maybe there's questions in your life that you need to wrestle out, and we want to walk alongside of you. And sent them out some incredible decision encouragers coming alongside of them, talking with them, helping them walk through that process. But at the end of the day, like, we want to set a culture, really, because biblically I believe that God is initiating a response in us, and we want to allow students to be able to respond in some way, shape, or form to the word of God that's gone forth. And yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. I'm right there with you, man. There's a piece of me. My time as student minister, we saw tons of people come to faith in Jesus. Like one night we did a haunted house, and it was fantastic. We made a giant
Yeah.
haunted house, and
Yeah.
almost 1,000 people showed up that night, and 75 people made decisions, and many of them I never saw again. But there were a few, and there was a handful that had their lives changed and are still following
Yeah.
Jesus to this day.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we like to throw things out and replace them with nothing. So we said Sunday school's the worst, and we said let's only go to small groups. And then
Yeah.
we lost, where are people actually learning the doctrines of the faith? We threw out choirs and said, oh, we need, 2 or 3 people up on stage. And I'm sure there were great reasons why at the time, but there's a shadow side to everything. And the shadow
Yeah.
side of not giving an invitation is that you don't see people get called to put their faith in Jesus. And I
Yeah.
just think you read the New Testament and you do see an invitation culture. You see
Right.
Paul standing before King Agrippa and giving an invitation. You see Peter in Acts giving an invitation. And you see that people are cut to the heart. And sure, we don't know how many of those people fell away from the faith. I
Yep.
just hate the mentality. I think it's a Jonathan Edwards quote where it's like, how many people came to faith in Jesus? And they're like, we'll see in 20 years. And like, I I get that, but we can celebrate that 100 people made a decision and moved
Yeah.
in some way. We'll get to heaven
Yeah.
and figure it out. But we
Yeah.
got to keep calling people to faith in
Yeah.
Jesus. And I think you
Yeah.
look at the ministries that are still doing that, and you're looking at the ministries that are growing, and you're looking at ministries that they're actually seeing some people, like seeing some dents in the lostness of their schools.
Yeah,
I think you
I think there's a fear ultimately. Like, I don't think that people are against giving an invitation per se. I think a lot of it stems out of a fear that one they've given an invitation to maybe respond to a salvation call at some point, and no one responds, right?
yeah.
Or there's been a consistent asking of students to respond in some way, and little to no response is happening. And so over time, there's a fear of like, well, no one's going to respond, no one's going to do it, so I'm just gonna, we're just gonna teach and we're gonna do this and pray and be done. But I think for me, it's going like this is my story. Like I think it was 2013. I felt like God called me. This was like a fall semester. God had called me to give an invitation every single week, and partly because we had not really seen a lot of students come into salvation, getting baptized, and I was just wrestling out with the Lord of going, God, this is my heart's desire. I believe it's your heart's desire. Jesus came to seek and save those that were lost. So God, I know there's people here that need to come to faith, but also that there's people to go reach. And so we would give an invitation every single week, and every single week, I'm telling you, for an entire fall semester, 0 people gave their life to Christ. And it was the most discouraging and frustrating thing walking through that season. And literally, we closed down the semester in December. We turned the corner in January. And I'm telling you, Landon, I was like, I'm not giving an invitation. I'm done. We tried it. It didn't work. We're trying something different. And that first Wednesday night back, just the Lord started prompting again. And I was like, God, just don't even, I'm going in on my message. This is it. This is what I believe you prepared, right? Like as if I can control it. And then, lo and behold, felt led to give an invitation. 5 students respond to the gospel. Then the next week it was 3. Then the next week it was 1. Then the next week it was 5. And it was like every single week for like 13 straight weeks, we saw somebody give their life to Christ, and we were baptizing kids. And all of that to say this, there was a fear that grew in me, not seeing people respond, of, man, I'm discouraged, and I don't think that this is worth it. I don't think this is working. But in that season, God really showed me who he is and how his heart is for the lost, and his heart is to go and reach people. And in that season too, one of the things that it did for a lot of our church kids is it allowed them to see, hey, we're serious about giving an invitation every week. So for that entire fall semester, there really weren't a ton of first-time guests, because culture historically was, well, they're not going to give an invitation. My lost friend's just going to come and have fun, but then they're going to go home and they're going to leave, and there's not a lot of point, right? Or there's a fear they're going to see me in my church element. Their life's not going to be changed. They're just going to go back to school and make fun of me, right? But then, like, after we did it consistently over time, they started inviting. They started bringing it because they knew that we were serious about seeing. We don't just talk about it. We were serious about seeing their lost friends come to Christ. So then they got serious about inviting, and they started inviting their friends, and that's when people begin to see. And then the next step from that was teaching them and training them on how to share the gospel so that they could then go into their schools and do the same. So there's small pieces to this thing, but I promise you it's worth it if you'll start taking the time to see those things happen.
What you just said, I feel like every student pastor needs to hear. When we get serious about inviting people to trust Christ as their Savior, our students get serious about inviting people to church. Yeah. I love that, dude. Like, that needs to be tattooed on my face soon, because that's fantastic, man. It does. I've seen that to be true. You know, the difference a lot of ways between growing student ministries and plateaued student ministries is, are people being saved and baptized? Because when everybody is rallying around their buddy who just accepted Jesus and got baptized, I mean, it's the hype train is rolling, and it is
obedience breeds more obedience.
Yes, man. And dude, student pastors, we had a. We did one of our early podcasts. Anybody who's listening to this, listen to this podcast with Shane Pruitt on giving invitations. And
love Shane.
He's one of the best evangelists we got today for youth. And or go back, and my favorite guy to watch give invitations is Clayton King. It's just it's so simple It's non-manipulative. It is just, here's the gospel, respond. And Gen Z and Gen Alpha love authenticity. And
Yep.
the less, like, one thing I've been doing with my invitations lately as I travel to speak is I've been saying, all right, I want, every head up, every eye open, everybody looking around,
Yep.
who wants to give their life to Jesus today? And it just breeds that, like, oh, this is legit. We're actually going to follow Jesus in the middle of our culture today. And dude,
Yeah.
I've watched God use that in just fantastic ways.
Well, and I'll just say this to kind of capstone too on that is, like, I'm an event guy. I love creating experiences and environments to see students come and have that easy invite to get to church. However, this is an every week thing. And so the literal first step for you, if you're a youth pastor listening, is just take the first step and invite them to respond. And it doesn't have to be salvation every week, but whatever the text is, whatever you're presenting, whatever challenge you're walking students through it's applicable to their life, invite them to that. And so whether it's to write something down, come forward, whatever it is, like, get creative, but invite them to move. And I believe consistently over time, you're going to see the result in what God wants to do.
I love that, man. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our conversation today. So if you're dealing with multi-site tensions, if you want to connect, where's the best way to find you and your ministry?
Well, you're welcome to reach out on social media. I'm probably not the best follow, but you can always get to me there. It's at Brian K. Preston, but then reach out via email to bpreston@battlecreekchurch.com. But man, I would love to connect, and my heart is for the youth pastor and come alongside and supporting their mission. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you, man. This has been a really great conversation, and for those of you listening, some great action steps for you are to go ahead and follow Brian on social media, follow the Battle Creek students, and then also go check out that podcast we do with Shane Pruitt on giving invitations. I think it'll be really helpful for you as well as just another resource. And as always, we hope today's conversation has helped you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. Thanks for listening today.